One comment about ethics. How many agree most people don't think about ethics until they've missed the opportunity to use them? Events occur. I do a lot of programs for businesses on the ethics issue, but the interesting thing is most of the time I'm called after they've already been in the paper for doing something unethical. Because all of a sudden we're faced with the reality. We make choices every day that sometimes can impact ourselves and impact others. You're fortunate to have people who are facilitators with you who have a lot of life experience. I was thinking of changes that people have gone through, just a sense of the change. This is a 1930 stewardess manual. Keep the clock and altimeter wound up. I like that one. How about this one? Warn the passengers against throwing cigars and cigarettes out the window. Low-flying planes. Keep an eye on the passengers when they go to the lavatory to make sure they don't mistakenly go out the emergency exit. You know, I mean, really, that's an out and down house. Really, when it comes, it wouldn't be in the manual unless it happened once. I mean, you know, somebody, well, it doesn't happen anymore. But you think of the digital age that we're in and the kind of changes that we face, and it's the same kind of thing for all of us. I was thinking of ethical issues. I was born in Florida, and right during World War II, and when we moved into Atlanta, Georgia, I grew up in elementary school where there were separate schools. There was a black high school. They wouldn't have been invited to this. In fact, it was an open air school. There were no walls, just a roof. There were separate drinking fountains, separate bathrooms. And you realize, you walk by a lot of those things and you wonder, what's your role? What do you have to do? I was young, had to deal with that. You know what the name was? Not the Atlanta Braves at that time. The baseball team was called the Atlanta Crackers. So you're dealing with a reality in my lifetime. Now, look around at the men and women who are at your table. We look old. But I want you to know, tell me if this is not true. The older you get, you still don't feel old. You're just a teenager with old skin. I mean, really, that's exactly. We still want to enjoy life. We still like the adventure and facing the reality. We get to impact you at a time when, my goodness, you're going to have choices all your life. I don't think I ever had a course on ethics when I was younger. I depended upon my parents to tell me what was wrong, and they were good at that. In synagogues, churches, our teachers, certain ones who took time to talk to you and care enough to counsel and give you feedback. And so all of us have people who have influenced our lives, and they're people we remember because they stood for something. So when we talk about all of these issues on this, Teddy Roosevelt said that success or failure will be conditioned upon the way in which the average man, the average woman, does his or her duty. The average citizen must be a good citizen if our republics are to succeed. The stream will not permanently rise higher than the main source. And the main source of national power and national greatness is found in the average citizenship of the nation. Therefore, it behooves us to do our best to see that the standard of the average citizen is kept high. You know, I'm sure we can have disagreements about what is an ethical action, right? I mean, we'll have a chance to discuss that today. That's the beauty of this. It isn't just listening to me or to someone talk about ethics. You're going to discuss issues. And there are different ways of approaching things. We have some people who are demonstrating, who have one set of values that moves them to do such a thing. And you'll have demonstrators on the other side of the street who feel equally important to do this. Can we understand that in a country that's free, one of the gifts are that we have the opportunity to affirm the right of people to disagree? And to realize I'm an op-ed columnist, and as a speaker I always get accolades. Oh, you're a wonderful speaker, isn't that nice? Then as soon as you write op-ed columns, 50% of the people don't like you. And I get letters. I get emails and I show them to my wife. Do you still love me after reading this? Because how many agree when we're upset at something, we don't wait to respond. Now we have Facebook, Twitter, emails. So what we do is we quickly see something. Send. Then you realize what you've sent. How many of you have sent something and go, oh, can I take it back? The choices we make are all tied to the ethics and the values that we hold. The fastest way to do business is based on trust. The best human technology is a network built on trust. Speed happens when when you trust the people you work with. I honestly believe trust is one of the most fragile commodities. It takes you a while to earn it, and you can lose it in an instant. And then you've got to gain it back. How do I deal with that? So constantly, I'm always thinking about trust in relationships that count to you, whether that's business, it's personal, it's critical value. And so every time I take any action that puts that in jeopardy, I'd rather tell you I'm going to do something than do it and then have you find out. Ooh, not good. And you know what? Your parents are in a tough diet right now because they're finally realizing they have no control over you. It's frightening. I remember when my son left with my car and turned the corner and I went, oh, I may never see it again. I didn't care about him, I wanted the car. But they were a challenge. You look at the dictionary, the study of standards of conduct, and moral judgment, moral philosophy. The system or code of morals of a particular philosopher, religion, group, profession. The branch of philosophy dealing with values relating to human conduct with respect to the right and wrong of certain actions and the goodness and badness of the motives and the ends of such action. I mean, that's interesting. It isn't just the standards, it's the motives. I've seen people do things that I would otherwise see as unethical, but at the time, it was an important choice that they had to make. I had a chance to deal with somebody who was behind the Iron Curtain, and they were stealing Bibles. They were taking the Bibles from everybody within the community. And they came to their house. And what they did is they knew that they would search every area and take every book that they had. So they took the Bible that they had and they put it under Grandma. She was so old and fragile, they knew they wouldn't move her. And they went all around the place and they took everything. And they realized they were willing to give their all. And then this woman was a violinist, and I had a chance to meet her, and she said, they allowed me to leave the Iron Curtain and go to Paris to play. And I went there, and I went into one bookstore, and I found hundreds and thousands of different Bibles, and I was cut off from that. Somebody had made the decision that you can't have it. We have choices we have to make. This is a Challenger incident. The engineers were very, very worried about it just before the flight, and they reported to the people at Marshall that they should not fly below 53 degrees temperature. And that night in Florida, it was 29 degrees. But the engineers were told that there was an appalling decision that they should think it over again. We later learned in the discussions inside Diacol, the engineers were still saying we shouldn't fly. The managers made a decision nevertheless to go ahead and fly. Managers of Diacol originally were called by NASA, and they said, no, our engineers are saying it's not safe, we should not fly. NASA then called back and said, hey, we've got deadlines, we've got things we need to get done. They recalled the Diacol managers, and they then counseled together, and they decided to let NASA fly. Implications of choices that come to us. You don't know when ethics are going to be a factor for you. And you will often feel alone. How many of you agree? It feels like, oh, I'm the only one maybe that's thinking this. And I've got to give myself permission to realize maybe a group needs a leader. Somebody will take a stand, and we'll give you some evidence about what you can do. Americans are obedient people. Stanley Milgram, years ago, they did the study on men. Women, you'd be very glad it was not done to you because it did not make the men look good. Because essentially what they did, this was all an experiment. The people didn't know they were in an experiment. They thought they were there to be part of an experiment, testing learning. There was a man behind a screen. They didn't get to see him, but they said that he was attached to a shock. And so what they said, it was essentially, every time the person makes a mistake, your job is to shock them until they learn. And if they don't give the right answer, shock them at a higher level. And what they ended up doing is they weren't really shocking the man. They were testing whether the person would be obedient to shock a person. And they had to design so he would keep missing, and they kept doing it. On his board, he would hear the man yelling from the, don't shock me, that hurts! That's really painful, don't do that to me! And the experimenter said to him, he missed the thing, shock him again. And then they moved it on his dial, it said, could be lethal. And they shocked him anyway. At what point do we disobey? At what point do we make a decision of saying, this is not right? Whew. Tough. quiz. Do you lie regularly? Yes or no? 91% said yes. Successful business people occasionally have to compromise their principles. Yes or no? 53% yes. Of those taking an ethical standard, did it help your career? Help, hurt? Look at that. Roughly thirds. This is starting to get interesting. For $10 million, would you abandon your family? Abandon your faith? Become a prostitute for a week? Give up your citizenship? How about this one? Kill a stranger. If you do not explore what you stand for, you're very vulnerable to questions and situations that come up to you, and that's the value of having a day like today. What are your choices? How do you make them? What we learned as we have research is that kids in elementary school understand clearly what cheating is and that it's wrong. But when they get into middle school years, they start to engage in cheating. And at the same time, there's not a lot of discouragement. Hey, other people do it. I don't want my grades to get worse because they're doing it. Got to handle it. We're not perfect. Pope John the 23rd. It often happens that I wake at night and begin to think about a serious problem and decide I must tell the Pope about it. Then I wake up completely and remember that I am the Pope. How many of you wish you had somebody wise to talk about sometime? You know, and you don't want to do that to your parents because they might get you in trouble. That's the value of having counselors at school. It's the value of having a good friend. How many of you have a good friend you can run something by and just a sounding board? If you don't, get one. They don't necessarily have to lecture you, but they're willing to be honest with you. Oftentimes, you don't even need to have somebody tell you what to do. It's just talking it over with a friend, and all of a sudden you realize, I don't think I want to do that. Choices. What's the point of being afraid of the zombie apocalypse when you're already a zombie? We're isolated. How many of you, and I don't think it's no different than adults as well. We have our own little hobbies and things that influence us and keep us from each other. If you came across a person in trouble, would you help? How many of you read in the paper of an example where there were 3 or 4 people around and they allowed somebody to get hurt and no one helped? And you go, how could they do that? The reality is, research has actually studied this whole area. Maybe you would help, maybe you wouldn't. Researchers have found that a person is less likely to help someone in trouble when other bystanders are present. People alone help 75% of the time. Only 53% when one or more other people, whether they're witness or the witness, tends to diffuse the responsibility. Hey, somebody else will do it. Or if they look at others as the problem. If no one else is helping, maybe it isn't something we even need to do. The ambiguity created by being with others lowers the intervention rate. Those most likely to help fell into 2 groups. The first personality profile had a strong sense of moral obligation and were self-assured. Most in this group were men. The second group's motivation was mainly emotional, based on personal attachment or identification with the victim. Women tended to fall into the second group, but both sexes were found in each, and often a mix of both motivations. Would I allow somebody else? What do unto others as I have them do unto me? And when I see somebody in a difficult situation, am I ready to intervene? Here's the interesting thing. They found in this research, if all of a sudden you're in a situation and somebody is in trouble and there's a group watching, if no one helps within the first 5 seconds, no one intercedes. The first 5 seconds is critical because if one person helps, immediately other people join in. If no one, they spend their time looking at each other, what are we supposed to do? If you're ever being attacked and you see a group coming, look at the biggest one and say, you come over here and the rest of them will help you. Take care of me. But would you act? It's challenging in so many ways and reasons why we don't. I've always wondered why somebody didn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody. I am that somebody that may need to act. And I've looked back on my life and there are times that I have. There are times I have not. And I've tried to look at that critically at times. None of us are perfect. The only place that perfect people exist are educational movies. No problem is too big, so it cannot be run away from. How many of you are told to avoid a problem? If you can't say anything nice, don't say it at all. Don't you even look at me that way. You think it's funny, don't you? You want to go to your room? Children should be seen and not heard. If I wanted your opinion, I'd give it to you. That's a good one. Some of you are writing that down. I know. So in response to that, what tends to happen, we avoid. You can be in a room and you feel something's wrong. No one says anything. And yet research suggests that if one person raises their hand and says something, all of a sudden other people will join in. You're not alone. I had a gentleman tell me he was at a meeting with his business, and he said, I just couldn't handle it. We were going through a transition, and we had our top executives together, and we were talking about something that did not match the values we put up on our wall. My stomach was churning. I needed that job. It was in the midst of a terrible time when there were not a lot of jobs available. And I just said, I got to say something. He went home that night and talked to his wife and said, look, something's happening. I've got to confront it, but it could mean my job. And I just want you to know I got to say something. And she said, if you got to say it, you got to do it. Next morning he went in and they started the conversation. He said, I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but what we did yesterday and what we discussed is not what matches on the walls that we have in this organization. And customers may see it, but I see it. And it's important that we take that down and we ought to act on it. And he was scared to death. He thought he was done. And everybody in the room said, I was feeling the same thing. Just didn't know what to say. To give the guts to be part of that. We teach collaborative problem solving in school. That's called cheating. School is built on individual excellence. I mean, you do have to work to establish grades. And how many of you want good people on your team? I mean, I like people who are smart and are very effective and ethical. So what ends up happening, you need to have individual excellence, but you need to be able to work together. That means you don't always have to have the answer. I mean, the beautiful thing about life is you have people who know more than you. How many of you can think of people you know who are really good at certain things? You just go, wow, they're so good at that, I go to that person. The strength of our country, the strength of our companies, the strength of the nation that we have is basically built on the fact that we have a diversity that allows us to capitalize on the strengths of so many people. But everybody's got to do their part. Oh, this was one that just, it blew me away. This was a study that was done along the same times of the Milgram study. Those are 3 different lines. A, B, and C. Now, what they did is they put another line over here that they had to determine whether it was A, B, or C. They varied the length of the person making the discrimination out to a point where they would have 100% reliability. They could decide reliably that it was C. Then they went another 10 feet further, so they started to miss it. People with 20/20 eyesight still couldn't determine it. But they were close. So what would happen is the experimenter had 4 people that had to say whether it was A, B, or C. And they wanted to see what would happen to this poor sucker here who had no idea what was going on, but he's going to have to make the decision, is A, B, or C. We know by his behavior, they moved it in where we know, with 20/20 eyesight, he knew that was C. But he's all of a sudden facing the reality that when the experimenter asked this guy, who looked just like him, he looks at that and says, it's B. What you know about human nature, when one person says something that's wrong, and you know the answer, what do you tend to look like? What do people do? Tell me if you haven't seen this in a classroom. Somebody says something that's wrong, everybody goes, oh, jeez. Look at the guy. Oh, that's what he does. He looks down at the other end and what in the world, let's see. But as soon as this one says B, shit. By the time 4 people have said B, what does the guy say? B. 76% of the people said B. You know what changes the data? If the authority figure in the study said anyone with a differing perception, please feel free to share it. I think within our schools we have a responsibility to create diversity. To challenge people to be different. Share different. That's the only way we learn, the only way we change. And at the same time, if there's any person here that breaks the flow, they didn't even have to give the right answer. They could have said A. Up in the 90% ranges that people say C. You have a tremendous impact by being a model for having the guts to speak up when things are right or when they're wrong. Don't get engrossed over things which you have no control, because that will adversely affect the things you do have control over. Who is the only person you have control over? It's you, and even that's in question on Mondays. I mean, let's be honest. You sometimes won't think at the time. How many of you had times you thought about it later? You know, I wished I'd said. You know, in the movies, they got a script. to retake till they do it right. In real life, there's no retakes. But you can go back. You could go back to a person and say, I'm sorry, I even said that. I thought about it. And I need to tell you honestly, I have a different response now. Well, you changed your mind. I know. I thought about it, but I felt I just had to tell you. There are times you just have to take responsibility for yourself. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Wayne Gretzky's great line. Will it always impact the behavior of others? Never. Yeah, I don't have control over that. All I have control over is whether I express it, whether I attempt to influence other people, and realization that occasionally I'm going to be wrong. Or we're going to have people who disagree. That's all right. Self-blocks to ethical actions. Oh, there's a lot of them. Hey, it isn't illegal. A lot of people think illegality. Illegality has to do with what laws say. Ethics comes from a values perspective that irrespective of whether it's legal doesn't necessarily make it right. So the challenge becomes, I have a different set of standards. We come from it in different ways and we have to deal with it. Hey, it's safe. Nobody's going to find out about what I did. Even if that's true, you know. Everybody does it. No one else seems to be concerned about ethics. Nobody's perfect. I thought you wanted results, not a saint. And finding, sharing, and living your values. Powerful page. You need clarity on your non-negotiables. You need to know what you won't budge on. You'll be buffeted by the winds. I want to share with you values. First, it's your anchor in tough decisions. Gosh, there's so many times I didn't know what to do. I've had times I've just gone backpacking alone, just gone up into the hills just to think things through, write out and sort it out because I needed time to think. But you've got to have your anchors. Where are they? What are your anchors? Lighthouse, to illuminate a positive and principled course, is what you keep focus on. If you know where you're going, you can get sidetracked. There could be course corrections, but you know where you're going. The stated principles are more likely to be used. Anytime you say what you stand for, you're more likely to use it. Privately held goals and values are very easy to cheat on. No one knows you have them. But if you communicate it, all of a sudden, gee, I said this was important, I'm more likely to act on that basis. Delivering on the promise builds trust. I had a gentleman tell me he took over a position where the last person who held the position had lost trust of the department he had to work with. I asked him, he says, how are you dealing with it? He says, I inherited his trust history. I had to change it. You know how you build trust when you've lost it? You build cycles of promise and deliver. I said I was going to do it, I did it. I said I was going to do it, I did it. I said I was going to do it, I did it. And then all of a sudden people begin to realize you have changed. But if you don't do the promising, they don't see it. Because we selectively scan for evidence that supports our perception. If you think just by changing your behavior you'll change a person's perception, don't believe that. Tell them, look, I want you to know I've lost your trust. And I don't blame you. But I want to earn it back. And here's what I promise I'm doing, and I'm going to check with you until I feel like I've gained this, because your trust is that important to me. Promise and deliver, promise and deliver, promise and deliver, and you get an opportunity to build that back. Take control. Provides a contagious role model for others. I would like people to be contagious for the right values. And every once in a while you will say, I get sometimes somebody say, I'm so glad you said that, because that's what I was feeling, but I didn't have the guts to say it. And I go, I hope it gives you a model of realizing, if somebody disagrees with you, what's the worst that happens? You have somebody disagree with you. I have loyal opponents. What I mean by that, I have certain people who, whenever I write an op-ed column, they write me. The first one they wrote was somewhat emotional. I always write back. And I say to them, thank you for writing, because I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me. But something you wrote here I hadn't thought about. Help me understand what you were saying. The second email is always better. Because they say, I apologize for my initial low brain function. And I didn't think you'd read it, even less that you would reply. But I thank you for giving me a chance to explain my position. I have some people I disagree with, but I respect immensely. And you know what? They're my loyal opposition, because if I ever go too far or I say something that doesn't communicate well, they'll write me. I appreciate you. You know I'm here. And I think you went a little too far here. I'm glad I have them. Honor and respect people who disagree with you, because they're a mirror that you seldom get in life. Our world tends to spend time with people who already agree with us. How many of you agree? We spend time, we go to sites that agree with us. We watch television shows that agree with us. So what ends up happening is we've got this nice little silo. The value of America is we have differences. And together we're far more better. Honor is a gift you give yourself and others, irrespective of whether ever anybody is in a position where they have to do this. I'm going to make sure I share it because it's for me. I have to live with myself. Values are clear, decision-making is easy. Final thing, and then we're going to make sure we have some time for you. Russ Walden, I'll tell you a story. You've got a little article in your handouts about this. Russ was a president of a company called Ridgecrest Properties. And I did a program in Cabo San Lucas, which is a beautiful part of the Baja in Mexico, and I was their speaker. I came in, it's presidents of companies, CEOs, presidents of companies. So I'm going there. I get off the plane, there's a man there along with it, and he just said, got into the same limo that I was getting into, and he said, you must be the speaker. And I looked at him and I said, what's this, a show? I mean, rented lips or something? How do you know I'm a speaker? And he said, well, I know all the CEOs and I don't know you. So I figure you must be the speaker. And I said, I am. I introduced myself, and he said, you know, we're tough on speakers. Now, I had never met this guy, but you meet people in your life who are banter people. They like to give you a hard time, just to test you. So I just looked back at him and I said, you know, I'm tough on people. They're tough on me. In fact, you're looking more and more like my first volunteer. And he looked at me and smiled and he said, you know, I like you better now. And I'm not going to give you any trouble. Later on, he came back to me and he liked my program. He said, I want to walk back. I want to go back with you to the plane. I said, well, no, there's golf. He said, well, you haven't seen me play golf. It's better for the course if I don't go. And I said, why do you want to talk? He said, you talked about some things that made me think. You see, I have a page. I figure if on one page I cannot describe the things that are my anchors, my grounding principles, then I probably wouldn't refer to it. And I just have things on that page that are important to me, and I never add anything to the page unless I take something off. And some of the things you said made me think about changing my page, but I want to argue with you a little bit, see if it's worth it. I said, whoa. Do you have a copy of your page? He gave me a copy of his page. I'll give you a sense of some of the things that are on it. Ethics are non-negotiable. The personal dignity of each individual is inviolate. A manager often breaks this rule and eventually self-destruct, but I will probably get him or her first. These aren't words, these are statements. Great real values, earnings will follow. Never sacrifice tomorrow's values for today's reportable earnings. We will only do things of which we can be proud if our people are ashamed of a project that would be a disaster. Defending yesterday is far more risky than making tomorrow. He had a number of items on that page, just a sample. I said, okay, it's great to have this, but how did it make a difference? He said, I had an executive vice president who sexually assaulted one of our part-time employees out on a project. They were building developments and managed care facilities where you can start with independent living on up to dependent living and assisted living. And a part-time employee was sexually assaulted by an executive vice president. They had evidence that it occurred. He had been there prior to this guy taking over the CEO position, but he said, the guy's in charge of this project. Yet 3 months from completion, he has information that nobody else has. He said he went home. He talked to his dog. That concerned me. I said, your dog? Yeah, I talked to Precious, because Precious doesn't talk back. I said, that feels better that your dog doesn't talk. Well, why do you talk? Because I just needed a set of eyeballs. I looked at my page. It says the personal dignity of each individual is inviolate. A manager often breaks this rule, will eventually self-destruct, but I'll probably get him or first. Does that make any exception for an executive vice president? Create real values, earnings will follow. Never sacrifice tomorrow's values for today's reportable earnings. You may take a hit this quarter because of this action, but your integrity is more important. Only the things of which we are proud. He went through all of these different things and he brought back and he brought the gentleman in that afternoon. You're going to be responsible for the choices you had. It is legally something we will have to report, we will have to go through, but I want you to know I will not allow you to be in this company for another day. your option right now to quit. If you do not quit, I will fire you. And the man said, you're going to fire me over that woman? They're a dime a dozen. You can't get along without me. And he just looked at him and smiled. Now I'm going to enjoy getting along without you. Get out of here, give me your keys. For 3 months, they took a hit. He had to go out on the project, fill in, work on other things. A woman came up to him at this particular development and said, I want you to know I was sent here by the woman who was sexually assaulted by your company. Really? She said, yes. Because of the fact that you held him accountable and because of the fact that you worked to help and deal with what she has gone through, she sends everybody here. How many agree credibility and trust are earned? You earn it in the tough decisions. And that's why you're going to have a chance to discuss this. Always do it as right. It will gratify most of the people in the sound of it. Oh, if only. You had to write your own page and share it with others. What truths and principles would you put on your page to help you act with integrity? Develop your own ethics check. Find the thing. Does your choice violate a valued principle, a core value, a religious tenet that you hold dear? Is it wise for the short and long term? When you think of people you respect whose opinions matter to you, how would they feel and what would they think of you and your action and your reasons for making this choice? If others did the same thing you plan to do, would it be good for society at large? Finally, would you be willing to have your rationale and decisions published for your friends and relatives and neighbors to see? Well, you know what's right and wrong. Your job is to live that, make some of those choices. And instead of waiting until you're surprised by ethical choices, start thinking, what are your anchors? What are the things you put on a page? And how would you begin to exercise in such a way that you can live with yourself with the trust and the honor that you deserve? I just want to thank you for coming. I think it's rare that you find people who will take the time to look at this. I respect you for doing that. Every single one of us who are here facilitating look to you to be the future of this country. And the value of taking some time to share some of that, we're excited about that. And I look forward to kind of walking around with you as you go through some of the next parts of this exercise. So thank you very much for the chance to present to you.